Chioma had spent her whole life believing she was unwanted, unfavored, invisible, until the day her grandpa asked a simple question that froze her heart. "Did you get the email about your trust fund?" And for the first time in her life, she realized something terrifying. Her family had been hiding money that was meant to save her. Chioma arrived at her grandpa Kofi's house thinking it would be a normal visit, but the moment he saw her, something in his eyes shifted. He looked surprised, almost worried, as if he had been expecting her to say something important. He asked her to sit, then casually asked if she had checked the new update about her trust fund. Chioma blinked, confused, thinking she heard him wrong. She asked him what trust fund he was talking about. His smile slowly disappeared. He repeated the question, trying to make sure she understood, but Chioma shook her head. She told him softly that she had never received any email, message, or update about any trust fund. She didn't even know one existed. Grandpa Kofi stared at her, shocked. His hands began to shake a little as he opened his email on his tablet. He scrolled through message after message, months and years of updates, confirmations, and notices with Chioma's name on them. All of them marked as forwarded. All of them showing details that Chioma had never seen in her life. When he looked up at her again, his face had turned pale. He whispered that her parents had promised him they were sending everything to her. They told him she was aware of the money meant for her future. They assured him they were handling everything correctly. And he believed them. Chioma felt the air leave her chest. She tried to speak, but no words came out. She thought about all the years she struggled, all the time she asked her parents for school money, and they told her there was none. She remembered working late after school just to buy notebooks. She remembered feeling like she didn't matter. And now she was hearing that there had been money meant for her all along. Her grandpa reached for her hand, but Chioma was already sinking into a silent shock. If her parents had hidden something this big from her, what else had they done? What else had they lied about? The room felt smaller, colder, as the truth settled in her heart. Everything she believed about her life, her family, and her own worth suddenly felt shaky. In that moment, she understood something that hurt more than anything she had ever felt. Maybe she wasn't unwanted or unlucky. Maybe she had been kept in the dark on purpose. Her whole life might not have been what she thought. And that realization broke something deep inside her. That Chioma's mind drifted back to her childhood, and the memories came in a slow, painful wave. She grew up in a house where love felt like something that had to be earned, something given to her siblings freely, but handed to her only in small, measured drops, if at all. She remembered watching her parents praise her brother for every small thing he did, buying him new shoes, new gadgets, even paying for extra classes when he wasn't even serious about school. Her sister got new dresses for every event, birthday parties every year, and trips she would brag about for months. But for Chioma, there was always a reason to say no. When her birthday came, her parents would say they were busy or that the timing wasn't right. Sometimes they didn't even remember the day. If she asked for something simple, like money for a school project, her mother would sigh and say, "Times are hard. We can't waste money." Chioma learned to stop asking after a while. It hurt less to stay silent. She remembered being only 14 when she realized she had to take care of herself. She needed textbooks for her exams, and her parents told her they couldn't afford them. But later that same week, she watched her father buy her brother brand new sports equipment. Her heart had dropped, but she said nothing. She simply found a part-time job after school, sweeping floors and packing items at a small roadside shop. She worked extra hours just to pay for the books she needed. Sometimes she came home so tired that she fell asleep still wearing her uniform. Meanwhile, her siblings laughed loudly in the living room, full of stories about restaurants they had gone to, new clothes they bought, or outings their parents planned for them. Chioma would listen quietly from her room, wondering why she was always the one left out. She tried to believe it was normal, that maybe she wasn't good enough or maybe her parents were just stricter with her. She tried to make excuses for them, even when the pain felt heavy. And every time her parents told her, "We can't afford this," she believed them. She thought they were struggling, thought the whole family was in the same situation. But now, with the truth about the hidden trust fund, every memory began to sting in a new way. Maybe the problem wasn't money at all. Maybe they simply didn't want to spend it on her. Maybe they believed her siblings deserved comfort while she deserved struggle. The thought made her chest tighten. All those years she worked, all those birthdays she spent alone, all the dreams she buried because she thought they were impossible. Maybe none of it had been necessary. Maybe they had the means all along. Maybe they just didn't choose her. Grandpa Kofi could not sit still. The moment Chioma told him she had never received a single update, he grabbed his tablet with shaky hands and opened his email. He scrolled quickly, his eyes narrowing as message after message appeared on the screen. There were updates from 10 years ago, 9 years ago, every single year, every single month. All of them were about Chioma's trust fund. All of them showed important details, bank statements, growth reports, withdrawal alerts, everything a beneficiary should know. And every single one had the same note at the bottom, forwarded to parents. He turned the screen toward Chioma. She recognized none of the emails. Her name was on them, but the information had never reached her. She felt a strange mixture of shock and confusion growing inside her. Her grandfather continued scrolling, and his face darkened more with each message. He wasn't just upset. He was angry in a way she had never seen before. He finally looked at her and said the words that made the room feel colder. He told her the trust fund wasn't a small amount. It wasn't some savings account or pocket money. It was her late grandmother's full estate. Everything she owned, everything she worked for, everything she left behind with the hope that Chioma would have a strong, safe, secure future. Her grandmother had chosen her specifically, believing she would need support in life. That money was supposed to pay for school, for housing, for opportunities her parents claimed they could not afford. Chioma felt her heart pounding. She had never known her grandmother left anything behind, let alone something this huge. Her grandfather continued, his voice trembling with anger and disappointment. He said more than 75% of the entire estate had already been withdrawn. Large amounts taken out in different years, always approved with signatures. Signatures that were supposed to belong to Chioma. But she had never signed anything in her life. She stared at the screen, and her hands began to shake. She could almost feel her childhood slipping through her fingers again. Every no, every struggle, every unfair moment suddenly making terrible sense. Her parents had money. They had access. They had taken what was meant for her. And they had done it quietly for years. Grandpa Kofi sat back, breathing heavily. He kept whispering to himself, trying to understand how this could happen under his watch. He trusted her parents. He believed they were doing right by her. He wanted to protect his granddaughter. Yet the people closest to her had been the ones using what was meant for her future. Chioma felt a deep ache rise in her chest. Not because of the money, but because of the betrayal. Because the people she depended on had been stealing what was meant to protect her. Her whole world had tilted, and nothing felt the same anymore. Chioma walked back home that evening with heavy steps, trying her best to keep her face calm. She didn't want anyone to notice that something inside her had broken. When she entered the house, her parents were in the living room, talking and laughing with her siblings like nothing was wrong. She greeted them softly, forcing a small smile. They didn't notice anything different. They never did. She went straight to her room, closed the door gently, and sat on her bed, trying to breathe. Her mind was full of her grandpa's words, the emails, the withdrawals, the lies. She told herself she needed to act normal, at least until she understood everything fully. So she stayed quiet, ate dinner silently, and went back to her room. But later that night, when she got up to drink water, she heard voices coming from her parents' bedroom. Their door was slightly open, and she could hear them whispering. Something made her stop. She felt a strange pull in her chest, urging her to listen. She didn't plan to snoop, but the moment she caught her name she froze. Her mother's voice came first, low and frustrated. She said the trust fund was almost empty, and they needed to figure out what to do next. Her father replied that they had already taken too much money over the years. He mentioned her brother's failed businesses, the ones they kept trying to push with more investments. He said her sister's weddings alone had swallowed a huge amount, especially the second one. Chioma's heart thudded painfully. So it was true. They had spent everything that belonged to her. Without shame, without guilt. She leaned closer, her hands shaking. Then her mother said something that cut deeper than anything she had ever heard. She doesn't need money, she whispered. She needs to learn her place. There was no confusion in her tone, no regret. It was cold, firm, deliberate. as if Chioma was not a daughter in the family, but an obligation they needed to control. Those words stabbed her so sharply she almost gasped. She covered her mouth before any sound escaped. She slowly lowered herself to the floor, sitting silently in the hallway, right outside their door. The house felt too dark, too familiar, too painful. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying not to crumble. For years, she believed she was the problem. She always tried harder, worked more, stayed quiet, never complained. But now she understood the truth. Her parents never intended to treat her fairly. They never wanted her to grow or succeed. They took everything meant for her future and used it like it belonged to them. Chioma closed her eyes, unable to breathe for a moment. Everything she knew about her family, every memory, every sacrifice she made suddenly felt like a lie. And she sat there, silent and shaking, realizing the people she loved had never protected her. They had only used her. Chioma woke up the next morning with swollen eyes, but her mind was clearer than it had ever been. She knew she could not confront her parents yet. If she did, they would deny everything, twist the truth, or hide the evidence. So she decided to stay silent. She acted as if nothing had happened, greeting them softly, helping around the house, and pretending she was her usual quiet self. But inside, she had already changed. She was no longer the girl who accepted everything without question. She was watching. She was thinking. She was preparing. She started her search slowly, carefully. Whenever the house was empty or everyone else was asleep, she moved quietly from room to room. She began with the old storage drawers, the ones her parents never touched anymore. She found dusty envelopes, old bank statements, and documents that should have belonged to her. She took photos of everything with shaking fingers. Some papers had transaction details showing large withdrawals made in her name. She had never authorized any of it. Then she found the worst part: authorization forms with her signature. Except the signature wasn't hers. It was a messy imitation, obviously forged, copied over and over through the years. She stared at each page in disbelief, her chest tightening with every new discovery. They didn't just hide the truth. They pretended she agreed to it. They used her name to drain everything meant for her future. She moved deeper into old boxes, pulling out files stuffed with receipts from her brother's business expenses, money taken directly from the trust fund. She found invoices for her sister's wedding preparations, dresses, decorations, even the honeymoon. All paid with money that belonged to her grandmother's estate. Each paper felt like a small wound reopening. This wasn't one bad decision or one moment of desperation. This was a pattern. A plan. Every year they took more. Every year they lied. Chioma's hands trembled, but she kept going. She had to know the full truth. She had to see exactly how far they went. With each document she collected, the reality became clearer. Her parents had never protected her future. They had slowly stolen it. But instead of breaking down, something stronger began to grow inside her. She wiped her tears and straightened her back. She promised herself she wouldn't cry anymore. Crying would not fix anything. She needed to be smart, calm, and patient. She needed proof, strong enough to show her grandpa, strong enough to face the truth, strong enough to take action when the time came. She saved every photo, every document, every forged signature. She wasn't planning revenge out of anger. She was preparing to take back the life they tried to take from her. The next morning felt strangely calm, but Chioma knew something big was coming. She didn't expect it to happen so fast. In the afternoon, the front door opened loudly, and her grandfather, Kofi, walked in without calling first. His face was hard, his steps were firm, and even the air in the house shifted. Her parents rushed to greet him, surprised and nervous, but he didn't smile. He didn't even sit. He simply said, "Call everyone. Now." His voice was sharp, and no one dared to argue. They gathered in the living room. Her parents on one side, her siblings sitting quietly, and Chioma standing near the doorway. Grandpa Kofi looked at her parents with eyes full of questions and disappointment. He asked them directly, without any softness, where the trust fund money had gone. Her parents exchanged quick glances, then forced small smiles. Her father began talking about family emergencies and necessary expenses. Her mother added that they only used the money to help the family survive. But Grandpa's expression didn't change. He knew they were lying. Before they could continue, Chioma stepped forward. Her hands were steady now. She placed the first document on the table, an old bank statement. Then another, an authorization form with a forged signature. Then another, records of transactions used for her brother's business, her sister's wedding, her parents' personal expenses. Each paper hit the table with quiet finality, but it felt loud in the room. She kept going, page after page, until the table was full. Her parents froze. Their faces drained of color as they realized the truth was no longer hidden. Her mother tried to speak, but no words came out. Her father stared at the floor, breathing heavily. Her siblings shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet Chioma's eyes. They all knew what the documents meant. They knew there was no way to explain it away. The room felt tight, silent, heavy. Grandpa Kofi picked up one of the forged forms with shaky hands. His eyes moved slowly over the signature. Then he lifted his head and looked at Chioma's parents with pure disappointment. For a long moment, no one said anything. The air felt heavy, too heavy to breathe. Finally, Grandpa spoke, his voice low but strong enough to cut through the silence. "You didn't steal money," he said slowly. "You stole her childhood." Those words hung in the room like a weight. Chioma felt her throat tighten, but she stayed strong. Her parents didn't respond. They couldn't. Her siblings stayed quiet, their faces filled with shame. In that moment, the truth was no longer hidden, no longer twisted, no longer controlled by lies. It was right there on the table, clear and undeniable. And everyone knew nothing would ever be the same again. Grandpa Kofi did not waste a single moment after that family meeting. The same evening, he stepped outside, made a few phone calls, and by morning he had hired a private attorney. He wasn't going to let anyone delay justice, not even his own children. Chioma watched quietly as everything began to move faster than she expected. What had been hidden for years was now being pulled into the light, one document at a time. The attorney started the investigation immediately. He collected every photo Chioma had taken, every forged signature, every bank statement, every receipt. He compared the signatures to Chioma's real handwriting. The difference was obvious. He traced the withdrawals and found out exactly where the money had gone. The more he uncovered, the worse it became. It wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. It was intentional. It was planned. The report he prepared was long and detailed. It listed everything: forgery, misappropriation, identity fraud, misuse of estate funds, unauthorized withdrawals, and deceit. When the attorney presented the findings to the court, orders were issued almost instantly. It felt like the whole house shook from the impact of those decisions. Bank accounts were frozen. Properties linked to the stolen money were placed under investigation. Expensive items bought with estate funds were flagged. Her parents, who once walked around the house so confidently, now looked smaller every day. Their faces grew pale, their voices shaky. The fear they had never shown before was now impossible to hide. Within days, they went from being arrogant and dismissive to desperate. They began pacing around the house, whispering loudly, blaming each other, blaming the situation, blaming anyone but themselves. When they received the official notice for mandatory repayment, her mother nearly collapsed. It was no longer a family issue. It was the law. And the law had no pity. They tried everything to protect themselves. Excuses, half-true stories, emotional speeches. When none of those worked, they finally turned to Chioma. Her father begged her to drop the case. Her mother cried loudly, holding her hands dramatically. They said things like, "We are still your parents," and "You will destroy your own family." But Chioma felt nothing anymore. Not anger. Not guilt. Just a calm emptiness that came after too many years of being ignored and used. She didn't shout or argue. She didn't explain. She simply looked at them, then turned around and walked away. She had spent her whole life carrying their burdens. Now they would carry their own. The law was finally doing what no one else had done for her, protecting her future. And Chioma was finally walking toward a life where she didn't have to suffer so others could live comfortably. Chioma finally received the small part of the estate that was rightfully hers. It wasn't everything she was supposed to get, but it was enough to breathe again. Enough to start a new chapter without depending on anyone. She used the money wisely and bought a simple, cozy apartment. Not fancy, not luxurious, just a place where the walls felt safe and the air felt calm. For the first time, She walked into a home where every decision was hers. She picked out her own furniture, her own colors, her own curtains. She arranged everything slowly, enjoying the freedom of choosing what she liked without being laughed at or corrected. Every night, she sat in her small living room, listening to the peaceful silence. No shouting, no insults, no one telling her she was ungrateful or useless. Just peace. A kind of peace she had never tasted before. She cooked what she wanted, slept when she wanted, and woke up with a smile because the day belonged to her now. One afternoon, she passed by a community center and saw a flyer for a program she had dreamed of joining for years. Back then, she never had the money, and even if she asked, her family would tell her it was a waste of time. This time, she didn't ask anyone. She didn't need approval. She took the flyer home, filled out the form, and enrolled the same evening. The first day of class felt like stepping into sunlight after years of darkness. She was nervous but excited. She finally felt like she could grow into the person she had always wanted to be. She made new friends who respected her, teachers who encouraged her, and classmates who didn't see her as a burden. For the first time, she felt seen. She felt valued. Her confidence slowly returned. She started walking with her head higher, smiling more, speaking up without fear. Every assignment she completed made her proud. Every new skill she learned reminded her that she was capable, smart, and worthy. At night, she often sat near her window, looking at the city lights. She thought about how far she had come and how her family never believed she could build anything on her own. Yet here she was, building a life brick by brick, step by step, a life they never thought she deserved. And as she watched the lights flicker across the sky, Chioma whispered to herself, "This is my life now. And I'm finally living it." Months passed, and Chioma's life slowly became peaceful. She went to her classes, came home to her quiet apartment, and felt her heart getting lighter every day. She no longer wondered what her family was doing. She no longer waited for their approval. She was building a life without them, and that life felt warm and steady. One evening, as she returned from class, she saw a group of familiar faces standing near the entrance of her building. Her heart paused for a moment. It was her parents and her siblings. They looked tired, stressed, and nothing like the proud, loud family she once lived with. For a few seconds, Chioma thought maybe, just maybe, they had come to apologize. But the moment they opened their mouths, she understood everything. Her mother stepped forward first, not with kindness, but with the same proud tone she always used. "Chioma, we need to talk. Things have been difficult. You need to help us." Her father added quickly, "Those penalties destroyed us. We have nothing left. You're our daughter. You must support your family." Her siblings stood behind them, pretending to look sad, but Chioma could see the impatience in their eyes. They weren't here because they missed her. They weren't here because they cared. They were here because they needed money. She felt no anger, just a deep, calm understanding. These were the same people who had pushed her aside when they were comfortable. The same people who told her she was nothing. The same people who never believed she could succeed. Now that their world had collapsed, suddenly she mattered. Slowly, Chioma stepped outside the gate. She looked at each of them, not with hatred, but with a strength she never had before. Her voice was soft, steady, and clear. "You didn't want me when you had everything," she said. "Don't come to me now that you have nothing." Her words hung in the air, and no one knew what to say. Her mother's mouth opened then closed. Her father looked down at the ground. Her siblings shifted uncomfortably. They were shocked. They were not used to this version of Chioma, the one who spoke for herself, the one who refused to break. Chioma didn't wait for them to respond. She stepped back, held the gate, and closed it. Gently, not in anger, but in peace. It was the softest goodbye she had ever given. For the first time in her life, she felt truly freed. Chioma's days settled into a rhythm she had never known before. She woke up early, breathing in the cool morning air as she walked through quiet streets, feeling the world move gently around her. She cooked her own meals, arranged her small apartment just the way she liked, and let the peace of her space fill her heart. Evenings were spent reading books she had always dreamed of, studying things she never had time or money for before, and letting her imagination wander to places she wanted to go. There was no hurry, no pressure, no one telling her she was not enough. She didn't live to prove anything anymore. She didn't need revenge, she didn't need to show superiority, and she didn't need to make anyone jealous. Every choice she made was for herself. Every quiet victory was hers alone. From her balcony, she watched the sun dip behind the city skyline and felt a warmth in her chest that she had never felt in her childhood home. She whispered a soft thanks to Grandpa Kofi, the one who had fought for her when no one else had believed in her, the one who had refused to let her future be stolen. She thought about her family, the parents who had ignored her, the siblings who had looked past her, and she smiled not with bitterness, but with clarity. They waited for her to regret leaving, to long for what she had given up, to feel guilty for walking away. But she didn't. There was no regret in her heart. Walking away had not been losing them. It had been finding herself. She thought about the trust fund, the money that had been meant for her all along. It didn't feel as important anymore. What mattered was the life she had built with her own hands, with her own choices. She felt rich in a way she never expected. Rich in freedom, rich in safety, rich in quiet happiness. Chioma leaned against the balcony railing, letting the wind brush her hair and the city lights twinkle beneath her. She finally understood what it meant to own her life. No one could take this peace from her. No one could question her worth. And no one could undo the life she had created. She breathed deeply, smiled softly, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly, completely free. She was rich, not because of money, but because she had herself. And that feeling was more powerful than anything she had ever dreamed.